Hello, YouTube viewers. Come on in and get ready for some fighting, shooting, and chicken. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilly, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia. Now, we'll tell you what all I'm talking about here in a second, but before we do that, be sure to go down below, click that subscribe button, ding the bell so you get notification every time we put a new story out, and if you don't mind, please give us a thumbs up.
Well, Steve, I know one thing. We're guaranteeing that we're going to have a good story with this one because, every so often when I decide to grow facial hair, like I am right now, one of my students came up to me the other day and says, "You look like someone familiar." Well, I think I know who we're talking about as we get ready to start this podcast. So bring on the gravy, Steve. Let's go.
Oh, indeed. Now, for years, the Colonel was the symbol for Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was retired from that job a couple of years ago, although a rather weird Colonel-like character is now on the KFC ads. Weird is, to me, is the word I'd say. But that's a story for another time. Most folks remember Harlan Sanders, the original Kentucky Fried Chicken Colonel, fondly as a wholesome grandfather figure, or they'd say in eastern Kentucky, a papa. But folks, don't be fooled, because Mr. Sanders was anything but innocent or wholesome. Right, Rod?
Right, Steve. Harlan Sanders struggled with a violent temper in his early years, in his younger years, by the way. After his father died when he was 5 years old, Sanders' mother got a job to support the family, and it took, his job additionally onto that he had to go and cook, look around and look for a job. He found a cooking job and cooking for his younger brothers and sisters while mom was at work. Well, that experience is what eventually led him to success with Kentucky Fried Chicken, but it was going to take a while because his mother eventually remarried when Harlan was 12, and he had a terrible relationship with his stepfather, which led him to drop out of school in the seventh grade and to go live and work on a farm.
Well, over the next decade, he'd hold a countless number of jobs, including service in the U.S. military. And his anger followed him, causing him to lose many of those jobs, including a job with a railroad after a knockdown brawlout with a coworker, and a job with Prudential Insurance for insubordination. During this time, Sanders also found time to become a lawyer. Eventually, though, Harlan Sanders was offered a job running a service station for Standard Oil of Kentucky in 1924, but the Depression caused that station to go out of business. The experience, though, led to the Shell Oil Company offering him a service station in North Corbin, Kentucky in 1930. It was a sweet deal for Sanders, too, with free rent in return for a percentage of sales, and he took it.
This is where all those years of cooking supper for his brothers and sisters started to pay off. For you see, Sanders had the idea to not only sell gas and oil, but to serve hot meals like chicken, ham, and steaks. He first started this in this rent-free space that he used for his home, but eventually moved the operation into the service station as a self-contained restaurant. And things started going pretty well for old Harlan Sanders until that pesky temper happened again. But the end result wasn't what you might think it was. In order to promote his service station and restaurant, Sanders commissioned a large sign on the highway. Not a bad idea, guiding customers to his fine establishment there in Corbin. And it worked very well as his business started to pick up. But that didn't sit well with some people, did it, Steve?
That's putting it mildly, Rod.
Yes.
You see, there was a neighboring Standard Oil gas station owner who Mr. Sanders just couldn't get along with. Imagine that. Matt Stewart was the owner of that competing gas station, and the two men were constantly at odds. And Stewart was not happy with that sign. So he took a brush and some paint and politely climbed up to the sign and painted it over. And this, in turn, didn't set well with Harlan Sanders. In fact, he threatened to, quote, blow Stewart's goddamn head off. Well, Harlan climbed up to the sign and repainted it. Then Matt Stewart, just as stubborn, promptly painted it over again. This time, though, while meeting with two Shell Oil managers, Sanders caught Stewart in the act Oh, he exploded.
He exploded all right. I mean, may not have been along the lines of an A bomb, but he still exploded. As Sanders and the two Shell oil officials ran up to the sign, heavily armed, Stewart was also armed. So when he saw the men approaching, he jumped down off the sign and he started shooting. Robert Gibson, one of the Shell managers and armed himself, was shot dead by Stewart before he could even draw his own weapon. Harlan Sanders grabbed Gibson's gun and returned fire, along with the other Shell manager, H.D. Shelburne. Sanders shot Stewart in the shoulder and the shooting stopped. Sanders, Stewart, and Shelburne were all arrested and placed on trial for murder. Harlan Sanders and H.D. Shelburne were acquitted. Matt Stewart was convicted and sentenced to 18 years in prison for killing Robert Gibson. Oh, by the way, Stewart was killed by a deputy sheriff 2 years later with rumors that the deputy had been paid off by the Gibson family to do the killing.
Wow.
Mm, yeah, wow.
Oh my goodness. Well, the end result was that Sanders had control of the gas station market in Corbin. And with that monopoly, he was able to expand not only the service station brand, but more importantly, that separate restaurant brand throughout eastern Kentucky. And folks, that's how Kentucky Fried Chicken was born. From Kentucky, KFC expanded first into greater Appalachia, then throughout the country, then the entire world. In 1935, Harlan Sanders was commissioned a Kentucky colonel by Kentucky Governor Ruby LaFoon, thus giving birth to the iconic symbol of the franchise. And in 1964, Sanders sold his baby for $2 million to a partnership of Kentucky businessmen, including John Y. Brown, who would later become Kentucky governor, and Jack C. Massey, and become the brand spokesman at a nice salary, of course. And here's a side note for you, Rod. After selling Kentucky Fried Chicken, the colonel was, well, let's just say he wasn't very happy with how the company's food was prepared. Didn't quite meet his standards, especially the gravy. And he wasn't afraid to share his displeasure, even if he was taking money to promote the franchise. In the late 70s, Sanders told the Louisville Courier-Dispatch,
My God, that gravy is horrible. They buy tap water for 15 to 20 cents a thousand gallons, and then they mix it with flour and starch and end up with pure wallpaper paste. And I know wallpaper paste, by God, because I've seen my mother make it. There's no nutrition in it, and they ought to not be allowed to sell it. Crispy recipe is nothing in the world but a damn fried dough ball stuck on some chicken. Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, they weren't the only ones to hear from the colonel. As late as 1979, Sanders made surprise visits to KFC restaurants, and if the food disappointed him, he had denounced it to the franchisee as GD, and I'm not going to say the words, GD slop, or he just pushed it on the floor. Nothing like passion for your life's work, huh? And nothing like being in the kitchen when this old feller comes in and says, "That's a bunch of GD slop you're making there."
There are so many different stories that go along with Colonel Harlan Sanders. And, a lot of people might wonder, too, where did Dave Thomas of Wendy's fame get his start in the fast food restaurant business? Well, he was a franchisee under Kentucky Fried Chicken under Colonel Harlan Sanders and these men. And, he learned a lot of things out of it. And, of course, he then took it from being a franchisee owner and then moving it on to creating his own empire, the Wendy's empire. And, it was still that kind of, how can we say it, sort of a hometown look or something about Dave Thomas each time he was on television or something and pushing his hamburgers and so forth. But I'm telling you, this was a staple. When I would go down and with my parents and go down to Pikeville, Kentucky, my great grandmother, she never had anything fixed for the family or anybody that was coming in. First thing she'd say, take a little bit of money, go up there to the KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and get some Harlan Sanders. That's the way she'd say it. I mean, that's the way she regarded the chicken. Get some Harlan Sanders chicken. And that's kind of where I grew up on it. I mean, hey, nice stuff. And I'm still very particular to the gravy, by the way. I love the gravy. I know the mashed potatoes are a different story, but I'm telling you, the gravy is there's just nothing like it, and it's not wallpaper paste either.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
You notice Dave Thomas and Wendy's
Yes.
never had gravy on the menu.
Yeah.
Do you reckon he was one of those franchisees that Colonel Sanders came in and raised hell on him about the gravy?
You know, he could very well have been, because I've heard some things that Dave Thomas has said at times of trying to talk with Colonel Sanders and trying to get things across to him and tell him about how certain trends were taking place. Colonel Sanders would just have no part of it. It was just, fix the chicken the way it's supposed to be and fix this the way it's supposed to be. Don't do it any other way. So I guess you could say maybe Dave Thomas got that idea somewhere.
Well, folks, that's the story of the birth of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Another story that makes up the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Thanks for listening. Now, if you like today's story, don't forget, like I said, to click that subscribe button down below and give us a thumbs up. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
And have some gravy.